Gentrification doesn't happen because people build new buildings. Gentrification happens because people don't.
This is a video about housing in LA, but it relates to a lot of cities in North America. It's about the cost of buying a house. I basically want to know if me or my friends, anyone in the middle class, if we'd ever be able to afford a house in a city again. But this whole thing, it actually started out with a much simpler idea for a video. LA teachers react to LA housing prices. I mean, don't you think it's common sense that teachers should be able to afford houses in the communities where they teach? So I brought in all these teachers and I had them look at how much house they could afford using these basic online calculators.
Okay, so it says I can afford a $257,000 house with a mortgage payment of $1,301.
Wow, okay. Well, I could purchase land, but not a house.
So it's basically like in the armpit of two freeways.
Yeah.
So 1 bedroom, 1 bath.
Oh, the bedroom is part of the living room, looks like.
Ugh, ugh.
Okay, let's say I can afford this. I'm also gonna get cancer. It's about 30 feet away from power lines. So that probably explains the slightly lower price.
All that video really illustrated was that houses do indeed cost too much. Teachers are indeed not paid enough, and it was just kind of a bummer.
It's kind of depressing to see what's out there in our price range.
So the real video starts now. I talked to all these academics, and they broke it down. It comes down to supply and demand.
The big challenge is when there is a vibrant economic space, kind of how do we accommodate new migrants into that city? And
I mean, the idea is, housing lasts for a really long time. I mean, 100 years for a housing unit. And you build your housing stock 1 year at a time. You can't build too many in any 1 year. And so if you have 10 years in a row where you don't build much, that creates a real hole in your housing stock for the future.
Because there's a housing shortage, it means that upper middle class people move into what are traditionally working class neighborhoods in order to afford a home. And that ends up making it difficult for the traditional residents of those neighborhoods to afford a place to live in their own community.
And so what we ended up is that the middle class housing has been converted into rich people's housing. And the working man's housing has been turned into middle class housing. And then the poor people's housing is kind of been erased.
And it's actually important to note that the gentrification Professor Myers is describing generally means it's communities of color that are being displaced. To see what that looks like firsthand, I met up with this super cool real estate agent. Her name's Rose Garcia, and she works in all these developing neighborhoods, and she showed me around them, and we looked at these houses that 5 years ago would have cost $100,000 and are now going for 3 or 4 times that.
This home, it's like less than 1,000 square feet. I think it's like 1,100 square feet. It's for sale for $305, and the problem is that it's a total fixer. And not to mention, even though it has a nice lot size, again, you're up against an alleyway. So this is the last kind of home that the standard average, city employee, teacher, anyone that makes around $65,000, $60,000 a year, this is what you're getting. You're getting an extreme, super fixer-upper in an area that's in the budding of its gentrification.
Oh, and another thing about this neighborhood?
There's wild Chihuahua packs that just run frivolously in the street, just like attacking people. It's crazy.
They don't have that on the west side.
No, they don't. Well, welcome to East LA. I'm born and raised in Highland Park. I born in '74, lived in Highland Park my whole entire life. I still live there now. And it's amazing to me as an agent, I've been in this business 16 years, that people are paying, upwards near $700,000 for a house where I know people have gotten shot at. I mean, it's crazy. That's part of what's happening in not only LA, but in the nation. Like I said, we own homes there. I'm happy that it's happening. It's just, it's happening really fast. And by the blink of an eye, I'm like, what happened to my city? It's just so different.
And so the question I asked is what can we do as a society or the city, or me just as a dude who cares about these things, how can we make it better?
Government really has to allow more housing to be built, and then also to make sure that those who have the least amount of money can still afford housing.
It just takes too long to get projects planned and get them approved and get them built.
In terms of general policy to help create more housing in Los Angeles, the number one thing I think is upzone the city. And by that we mean if you look at any piece of land, right, in Los Angeles, there's gonna be rules from the zoning code, how much units of housing can you do there? And that's the restriction that's really keeping us from creating enough housing in Los Angeles. So we need to really think, hey, are we a city that actually wants a lot of people to be here, that wants to be diverse, that wants to build transit, that wants to let people have walkable communities? And if so, let's let there be a little bit of density in a few other places other than just downtown and like Hollywood. Another obstacle to housing is that every time you build anything in Los Angeles, you have to put in a certain number of parking spaces, whether you need them or not.
In a lot of cases, there are 2 parking spots required per unit built.
Kind of like that kind of stuff drives up the cost of construction, and it makes it harder to meet our needs for more housing.
So I met up with this guy, his name's Mott Smith, and he calls himself a social developer, and he really echoed. He took this old bungalow court and he turned it into townhomes that were kind of like condos, but were classified as single family homes, and for some kind of arcane reasons, were much cheaper to develop.
We're a developer doing socially conscious projects in Los Angeles. We like to do things that are regulatorily innovative. And so Jane Blumenfeld, the planner in the city of Los Angeles, said, why is it that everything has to be a condo? And so she worked for a couple of years to craft something called the Small Lot Ordinance, which actually lets you develop townhouse type buildings, like that kind of density, on small lots, so using land much more efficiently. And simply by doing this, it's allowed developers like me to cut our costs to the point where we can afford to build at a price that more people can afford to buy. It doesn't solve the affordability problem by any stretch of the imagination, but when we did this project, this was still the lowest priced, new quality, single family housing in the area. Future's not finding a way to do cul-de-sacs and 5,000 square foot houses on 10,000 square foot lots and somehow make that affordable to the world. I don't think that's a winning strategy. I think the future is coming up with new ways of building housing, new ways of being in the city, and using all of our resources more efficiently.
And that's just one example of a rule change to city laws that let the developer build more for cheaper. So we definitely need to encourage the city to make it easier to build. But overall, we as a generation just need to pay a lot more attention to the health of the housing stock in our cities. Most people are just kind of in it for themselves. As long as they can afford to buy a house or rent a house, the overall housing stock doesn't matter to them. But the truth is, if you actually want to live in a city that is a cool, diverse, interesting place, this is like one of the main things that you should pay attention to in like the politics of your city. And that's why I made this video.